basic information I requested more than 2 years ago related to the FBI's mishandling of harassment claims made by FBI female employees. Wow, it's warrant. They could have shot and killed somebody. That's why it was in the document. And they even searched Melania's clothing drawers. Now, that internal report declared that the report was done on April 17th, the day before the FBI said the report was ongoing. What a bunch of corruption. Christopher Wray, not sticking around for long. After Trump comes in, he's going to be replacing him. We already know that Kash Patel has been nominated, but for some reason, people like Kristen Welker haven't gotten it through their thick heads that that means that Christopher Wray is getting fired. They keep saying things like, oh, he's got a 10-year term, and then it's not over. Well, the truth is, as we've long discussed here, Christopher Wray authorized the raiding of Trump's house and Melania's bedroom and Barron's bedroom. So we're not keeping him around. He needed to go a long time ago, and now Trump is making that known. Now we're going to watch these two clips from the president articulating exactly how bad the FBI is before we jump into this letter from Chuck Grassley, an amazing senator from the great state of Iowa who is lacing into Christopher Wray in this 11-pager. I'm excited to get to that, and so stick around to see where that goes. But here is the president on with a long interview with Kristen Welker explaining Christopher Wray is going away.
Are you going to fire the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, who you appointed?
Well, I can't say I'm thrilled with him. He invaded my home. I'm suing the country over it. He invaded Mar-a-Lago. I'm very unhappy with the things he's done. And crime is at an all-time high. Migrants are pouring into the country that are from prisons and from mental institutions, as we've discussed. I can't say I'm thrilled. Again, I don't want to be Joe Biden and give you an answer and then do the exact opposite.
We're going to talk about
so
that.
I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to say is I certainly cannot be happy with him. You take a look at what's happened. And then when I was shot in the ear, he said, oh, maybe it was shrapnel. Where's the shrapnel coming from? Is it coming from heaven? I don't think so. So we need somebody to straighten. You know, I have a lot of respect for the FBI, but the FBI's respect has gone way down over the last number of years.
Don't you have to fire him in order to make room for Kash Patel if he is in fact confirmed?
Well, I mean, it would sort of seem pretty obvious that if Kash gets in, he's going to be taking somebody's place, right?
Yeah,
somebody is the man that you're talking about.
You're going to need to make room for him. So Christopher Wray's going to have to go bye-bye. And you remember that Trump said that they are suing for $100 million, saying that there was political persecution that occurred against him. This is an older story from back in August, but there was a memo they discovered, and we haven't seen this actual lawsuit filed yet. I'm waiting for that. But they said that they intend to sue the Justice Department for the raid, right? Filing a notice of claim. And these things take a lot of time. Anytime you're suing the government, there's a whole process for it. So we're waiting to see some of these documents that come down the pike. And if this changes at all now that he's won, right? He's suing the government for what they've done, but he is now the government. He is now the executive branch. So we'll see. That was one exchange. Here's another exchange where they're talking about the replacement of Christopher Wray. Kash Patel's coming in.
If they think that somebody was dishonest or crooked or a corrupt politician, I think he probably has an obligation to do it. But
are you going to direct him to do it?
No, not at all. We have two great people there. We have him and we have Pam. And Pam Bondi has been like a rocket ship. She's very popular and very good and very fair. And Kash Patel is very fair. I'll tell you, I thought Kash may be difficult because he's, a strong conservative voice. And I don't know of anybody that's not singing his praises. The other day I was watching, and Trey Gowdy, who's a moderate person and very smart and very respected in the party, Cash's biggest fan, he said, this is the most misunderstood man in politics. He's great. I guess they work together on the Russia hoax or something.
Trey Gowdy's even on board with Kash Patel. That's interesting. All right, so that is what the president is saying that is changing at the FBI. And now we have Chuck Grassley, who is a United States senator, who is sending this burner letter to FBI Director Wray. All right, Director Wray, this is Chuck Grassley from Iowa speaking. 7 years ago, I presided over your confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. We confirmed you. After Trump nominated you to become the 8th FBI director in the 116-year history. The Senate confirmed you and to your current position in hopes you'd bring change to the FBI after the politicization and the scandal presided over by your predecessor, Loser Comey. While I sincerely congratulated you on your nomination, I reminded you that an FBI and their directorship's 10-year term is a ceiling, not a floor, and laid down my expectations for your service. Now, these included, foremost, the prompt and thorough compliance with congressional oversight and the protection of whistleblowers, whom I've spent my entire career defending. And as we stand at the threshold of a new Congress and a new administration with 7 years of watch under the bridge, Chris, you failed in these fundamental duties as director. Even President Biden Biden, who denied weaponizing his administration against President-elect Trump, has finally admitted that political bias has indeed infected law enforcement when he pardoned his crackhead son. These failures are serious enough and their pattern widespread enough to have shattered my confidence in your leadership and the confidence and hope that many others in Congress placed in you. Rather than turn over a new leaf at the FBI, Chris, you've continued to read from the old playbook of weaponization, double standards, and a relentless game of hide and seek with the Congress. As your tenure as FBI director comes to an end, I want to take this opportunity to tell you where you went wrong for the benefit of the Bureau and that of your successor, Kash Patel. And this is being written by Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa. He says the following: contrary to the assurances you made to gain confirmation to your position, Chris, the FBI has shown outright disdain for Congress during your tenure. Now, by doing so, you've hindered Congress in the exercise of our duty to do our job. You said that you were going to be appropriately responsive and prompt, but you didn't live up to your word. Promises made, promises broken. That's a recurrent theme for you. One of the most egregious examples of your failure, Chris, is to provide basic information I requested more than 2 years ago related to the FBI's mishandling of harassment claims made by FBI female employees. Wow. This request was not pulled out of a hat, okay? It was based on credible whistleblower disclosures alleging hundreds of FBI employees had retired or resigned to avoid accountability for Bergdorfing and for fanning whalesing each other. Worse than what they did. That was consensual. This is misconduct, not just conduct. Whistleblowers also allege that the FBI had disciplined senior officials less severely than their subordinates. Gross. The FBI is so gross. In November 2022, I released internal FBI documents corroborating this. I and my staff ever since have asked repeatedly for information sufficient to determine how the FBI handled these serious claims and how widespread the problem really is. The FBI is like, well, we're going to go investigate people who attack women and ignore all the people who attack women in our own FBI agency. The FBI told the media it would provide the information to me. You personally told me, Chris, on December 5th, when I confronted you with your inaction on this, that you would check with your team and you would get back to me. You told me to my face. Your deputy director, Paul Abate, also publicly stated that the FBI is serious about removing officials for Bergdorfing each other. After a year since you made that pledge, over 3 years since Abate's public comments, and after many more requests to FBI to provide this information, neither of you have followed up at all. This inexcusable delay and obstruction by you is preventing Congress from addressing the shocking misconduct at the FBI. This is a promise made and broken and one of the utmost importance. Now, likewise, in May and August of 2022, 2 years ago, I wrote you requesting information about the vetting of individuals who were evacuated from Afghanistan during your botched withdrawal. These letters highlighted troubling revelations in a February 2022 report from the Office of Inspector General, which revealed that Afghanistan evacuees weren't vetted against all available DoD tactical data before you paroled them into the country. The report revealed that the National Intelligence flagged at least 50 Afghan evacuees as potentially significant security concerns. The FBI failed entirely to answer my inquiry on this. Instead, in July, you participated in a classified multi-agency briefing to congressional staff on the issue, which revealed new information about additional people beyond the original 50 that you flagged, but you failed to answer any of the questions at all. Then, in August, the Judiciary Committee asked you directly, I asked you specifically, whether the FBI knows where certain flagged evacuees are located. Where are they, Chris? Your answer left the impression that you hadn't even looked into the matter. I've asked you multiple times. You said, I can't sit here right now and tell you that we know where all they're located at any given time. I mean, that's probably true. Since that time, on October 7th, the FBI arrested Nasir Tawhidi after he allegedly planned an election day terrorist attack on behalf of ISIS. The DOJ's criminal complaint claimed Tawhidi entered in 2021 during the same time period that you brought in people from your botched withdrawal. He was placed on parole. You failed to respond to any of those requests as well. Then, in May of this year, another report confirmed the concerns that I had about those people you were bringing in. That report outlined various failures at Homeland, including its failure to identify and resolve issues for non-citizens when they've got derogatory information or gaps in their records. The same report also noted that the FBI and their refusal to provide the government with full access to their crime records occurred. The Inspector General also noted the FBI refused to provide access because they said it deems immigration and naturalization issues as non-criminal matters. Okay, so in other words, all this is saying is the FBI has records about whether these people who are coming in are criminal or not. Immigration says, we want to check their criminal record. They say, well, you're checking their criminal record for immigration purposes. We're not an immigration agency, so we don't give you access access to criminal records for immigration purposes. Great. Then Homeland says, we don't have them. Then they just let him in. This position is hard to defend, especially given the fact that, again, as the report noted, parolees were convicted of serious crimes here that the FBI knew about. Abusive contact with young people, indecent exposure, other Bergdorfing assaults, auto grand larceny, assault and battery, and more. Once again, FBI, with you at the helm, you failed to respond to any of this. You let all these people come in, you don't care. At the very beginning of your tenure as the FBI director, I presented you with evidence, Chris, of your failure to investigate Hillary and Hillary's mishandling of highly classified information when she was Secretary of State. Another example of your double standards. And consistent with that failure, the FBI, yet another example of broken promises. You didn't investigate bribery allegations against Joe Biden, and then you strictly scrutinized President Trump. You've repeatedly claimed, Chris, you would ensure the FBI does justice, but that hasn't happened. Under your watch, you had possession of incriminating information against Joe Biden for 3 years until I exposed the existence of the record outlining those allegations, but you did nothing to investigate it. This record, known as an FD 1023, documented allegations of bribery between them and among Joe Biden. And Chuck Grassley has really been a hero on all of this. He broke a lot of stuff. We got the whistleblowers. I think he started to help crack that shell. The FBI confidential human source behind this FD 1023 was on the FBI's payroll during the Obama administration. He was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. The FBI gave that guy permission to violate the law, and information he provided was used in prosecutions. The FBI called this highly credible. And Abate testified, we often redact documents, but then after this document was made public, which didn't even include the source's name, the DOJ not only publicly named him, but they indicted him. They said, oh, you're a criminal now, because now we have to smear you. But still to date, the DOJ and the FBI have neither answered whether they investigated the substance of the form, and it sounds like this is a shameful cover-up. Grassley says, as I noted back in February of this year, if a highly regarded source had said that Trump accepted a bribe, the FBI would pursue this information to the end of the earth. They wouldn't have buried it in a closet for 3 years. All right, Chris, actions speak louder than words. And in this regard, the FBI's actions don't just speak, they shout. The FBI has shown itself all too willing to act against President Trump based on sources lacking credibility like those in the Steele dossier. This piece of foreign disinformation was created by Hillary's paid opposition. That partisan source and the failure of the FBI to vet that information didn't stop you guys. You offered it to the FISA court. Hillary got evidence, gave it to the FISA court. The FISA court then spied on Trump. It was all fake. Moreover, because of Senator Johnson and Grassley, they exposed the fact that the FBI knew the Steele dossier had credibility problems and may have been part of a Russian disinfo campaign, and they got the warrants anyway to spy on the campaign anyways. Now, my and Senator Johnson's oversight work also exposed the Steele dossier. This is some of the most egregious Orwellian conduct, says Grassley, that I've witnessed in my nearly 50 years in Congress. And the rightful dismissal of Comey should have closed the book on this, but it didn't. You're now doing it, Chris. President Trump has been subjected to a continuing double standard, an area where your failed tenure is consistent with Comey's. While the FBI under your leadership has turned a blind eye to info in that 1023 form, FBI agents, meaning you covered up for Joe while you were protecting him, you raided Trump's home to get records, to get paperwork. You raided his house. In that raid, 30 armed agents entered the home of a former president of the United States with full authorization to use lethal force if they needed to execute its warrant. They could have shot and killed somebody. That's why it was in the document. And they even searched Melania's clothing drawers. They're sick. Trump's wife's clothing drawers. Sick. This raid occurred despite serious questions about the need for it. President Trump apparently was cooperating with the investigation, notwithstanding liberal press reports. He voluntarily turned over 15 boxes of documents and met with the agents in there. Said, how you guys doing? You want some lemonade? Further, on June 3rd, 2 months before the raid, Jay Bratt, who should be at the top of the list for a criminal investigation, chief of the counterintelligence and export control section, was accompanied by FBI agents, visited Trump. Trump showed up. Jay Bratt was there. He said, hey, good morning, guys. I appreciate the job you're doing. Anything you need, let us know. Bratt later sent a letter to Trump's lawyer, said, why don't you guys put a stronger lock on the door? They did. Following this, Trump also complied with a subpoena for security footage. That was the last action before the FBI executed a search warrant. Now, to be clear, this entire time when the FBI agents were there, they were making their case. They were looking for how to charge him with stuff. Trump invited them in like they were on the same team. They were treating him like a criminal case. No former president has had to endure anything like this. No such raid took place of Hillary's, even though she and her staff mishandled highly classified info while using using a non-government server after repeated warnings that it was a security risk. And then they literally deleted evidence and destroyed it. And she was seen mocking it in video clips, like what, with a cloth? Indeed, in an unheard agreement that my oversight exposed, Grassley says, the FBI agreed to destroy records and laptops associated with Clinton staff after reviewing them, even though those records were responsive to congressional records. So the FBI deleted the Hillary evidence, just like they deleted the Butler shooting evidence when they torched that kid's body. No such raid occurred on the home of Biden, even though his records were consciously divided up, some stored in his garage next to his Corvette. And by the way, Hillary was never president. Biden at the time was vice president. Trump had a higher claim to those documents as the chief executive. More classified records were found by his attorneys, and they had days to go clean them up, and they colluded with the White House. This is also despite the fact that the White House took more than 2 months to publicly disclose that they found docs in Biden's house. Grassley says, I warned you after the Mar-a-Lago raid that you risked the credibility of the FBI, and you did just that. A double standard in a nation that rightly claims justice is blind is no standard at all. And so, Chris, the FBI, under your lack of leadership, also served as an accomplice. That's a criminal phrase for the Democrats' false information campaign designed to undermine my investigation of Biden. You are a co-conspirator. You are accomplice in this crime. On August 6th, Senator Ron Johnson and I were finishing our report on the Biden crime family. You succumbed to pressure from Democrats, and you provided an unnecessary briefing that Democrats requested in an effort to falsely label our investigation into the Bidens as Russian disinformation. That briefing consisted of information we already knew, and information that wasn't even connected to Biden. We made clear at the time that our concern that the briefing would be subject to a leak that would shed false light on the focus of our investigation. And that's exactly what happened. On May 1st, the Washington Post did just that. They came out and they said that what we're doing is Russian disinfo. At the briefing, and many times following it, we asked you, Chris, for records documenting what happened at the briefing and its intelligence basis. You said, oh, this is Russian, really? And who made the decision to brief us? The FBI has consistently failed to fully respond to these requests. Okay, so just so we're clear, the FBI is yanking senators around like dogs on a chain because they're so dumb and pathetic that the FBI just says, oh, we have to hold a classified briefing. And all the dumb senators are like, oh, we get secret info. They go over there, and Grassley is the only one with any observational skills to say, maybe they're jerking us around by the chain. The FBI has consistently failed to fully respond to these requests. Who even ordered this briefing? Why are we here? They willingly use the briefing for partisan purposes. Congress is asking questions. Just give them a briefing. On what? I don't know. Putin? Whatever. Oh, that's a good one. We haven't talked Putin in a while. To this day, because of the FBI's lack of transparency, we still don't know what the basis was for the briefing and have been prevented from questioning the briefers. Now, if these examples aren't enough to make my point, there are many more to offer, Chris. For more than a year and a half, the FBI has failed to be responsive to repeated requests, again addressed to you, asking for information about the outrageous memo prepared by analysts in the field office in Richmond. That memo struck fear in believers across the country by purporting without anything other than biased, discredited sources like the Southern Poverty Law Center to tie faithful Christians to violent extremism. Shortly after a whistleblower disclosed the notorious memo to the public, I requested the FBI provide answers backed up by records. The FBI, in its paltry response, deflected on the basis that it was conducting an internal investigation into the incident. Little did the FBI leadership know the final strategic review report that was conducted by your division would be produced to Congress by the next year, as the FBI was directed to produce it by the Authorization Act that gives them money. Now, that internal report declared that the report was done on April 17th, the day before the FBI said the report was ongoing. What a bunch of corruption. Oh my gosh. FBI shows up, Congress says, hey, where's your report? Your homework's due. It's due now. Oh, it's ongoing. It's not done? No, it's not done. Turns out it was done. It was finished the day before. The FBI actively misled and obstructed Congress. That's a crime. He's now an accomplice, and he's lying and obstructing Congress. Christopher Wray is a criminal. In the case of the Richmond memo, my oversight continued throughout the remainder of 2023 and has continued since, with my office urging the FBI to provide more information on the memo and the internal review. The FBI waited until late September 2023, which we now know was more than 5 months past the review's completion, to even tell us about the findings. I later led 7 of my colleagues in a letter raising deep concerns on the content of that internal review and your testimony before Congress that the incident in Richmond was one field office and a single product by a single office. Once redactions were lifted from the memo, in a version provided to the House Judiciary Committee, it was apparent the FBI had redacted info from the memo memo related to the input from the other field offices. So in fact, this wasn't a product of a single office, it was multiple. So you lied again. You later defended your testimony when I confronted you with the contradiction by saying the input from the other offices was limited to verifying a couple sentences. So they didn't actually work on it. It was just like a sentence or two. Well, nonetheless, you failed in that exchange to answer why the FBI redacted info and whether you had reviewed any of this. And you should know those things when you're testifying about this topic. But even more troubling, Chris, was your testimony that this was a single product. Congress later discovered this claim was false and materially misleading. Lie. And neither you nor the FBI to this date has answered my request to explain your testimony. The FBI later revealed the existence of an external memo to me in a single line in its 1027 response with no explanation at all. According to the staff present at the briefing, the FBI withheld information about this memo. Later, House report confirmed the second product was also drafted by analysts and was reviewed and planned for dissemination. Based on the revelation that the memo was not a solitary product, I led 15 colleagues in yet another appeal. But rather than come clean, you at the FBI waited nearly 7 more months to respond until August. And after I confronted you on portions of that, finally we got to it. The FBI's embarrassing August 2024 response failed to answer any points that I raised, and you ignored my request. And to this day, still hasn't happened. You failed to clear up your testimony, even after being questioned by many members of the Senate, a state of affairs completely unacceptable from one of the nation's premier law enforcement agencies. The FBI's response also ignored the request of 16 senators for additional info related to the permanent deletion of files related to the memo, which was ordered by your deputy director. In a call my staff had with the FBI, officials assured us that these files are recoverable and that they could be provided, but she hasn't done it. The continuous mule-headed war against transparency violates your oath. Now, while your failure to fulfill your duty regarding multiple examples is sufficient reason to question your tenure, your broken promise to protect whistleblowers and to be transparent is the final straw on the camel's back, Chris. The FBI's silence in response to my request is completely unacceptable. As I said, you promised at your confirmation hearing to do so. Protecting these brave patriots has been a priority of mine for 50 years, but my pleas to you on their behalf, just like many other oversight requests, have fallen on deaf ears. On July 18th of last year, nearly 17 months ago, I led 22 of my colleagues in a letter asking you to commit that no taxpayer money would be used to retaliate against whistleblowers. You pledged to protect them, but you failed to commit to even this basic thing. Shouldn't even be controversial, but you failed to even reply. Now, likewise, on September 13th last year, 15 months ago, I asked you to provide records on information about safeguards in place to protect whistleblower communications. Again, my simple request was greeted with deafening silence. Reagan often said we should trust but verify. I employ that same policy. When I ask the FBI for documents, it's to determine whether or not what's being said is verifiable. Those documents are worth more than mere assurances because contemporary records paint an unmistakable and undeniable picture. The FBI here, as in so many instances, has failed to provide documents I've reasonably requested to verify your own claims. Scripture tells us that one who can't be trusted in little matters can't be trusted in larger ones. You failed both. You've also failed to adequately respond to my questions about protecting whistleblowers. One example, I wrote to you back November 2018 about the raid of a whistleblower's home relating to uranium-1. You took nearly 2.5 years to give me a 118-word response. That response didn't give us any information, but your bland assertions makes our job harder. And again in 2019, I asked about Special Agent John Parkinson, who initially made disclosures in 2008, lost his security clearance. And your response is not addressing those either. So I've given quite a few examples here, you're right. But other examples of blatant failures abound. The FBI for years has failed to update me on the status of criminal referrals that I've made to them. Even Brett Kavanaugh, it's failed for over 2 years to answer my inquiries into people like Mark Houck, the pro-life activist, and the raid of him. You haven't answered any questions about Project Thor, a successful ATF anti-cartel program. Failed to respond about a man who threatened Judge Eileen Cannon, the Florida classified documents judge. Nothing about Obama's State Department. Failed to answer my letter about the DOJ. Failed to update me on the status of a criminal referral I made to the FBI. Failed for over 1.5 years. I also wanted to know about your private FBI jet, about you flying around on it so you don't have to sit in traffic. Where's that? You have failed for 6 years to give me any information about the shooting of an unarmed man sitting in his car. Tons of questions. The list goes on and on. All right, Chris, I asked you a lot of stuff. And shout out to Chuck Grassley for trying to investigate this stuff. Okay, he's like a senator. This is his job. He's in Iowa. He's working his booty off. Like, let me ask, let me check, let me look into this. I don't know. Is that corrupt or not? Let me see what the FBI has to say. They don't care. They're too busy creating Russia collusion hoaxes. Your and Deputy Director Abate's failures to take control of the FBI has hindered hindered my work and others throughout multiple Congresses on matters that needed info, has prevented the truth on some issues from ever reaching the American people. You've also shown a continuing double standard and a failure to carry through on promises. And so for the good of the country, it's time for you and your deputy to move on to the next chapter in your lives. Get out. I've spent my career fighting for transparency, and I've always called out those in government who have fought against it. For the public record, I must do so once again now. I therefore must express my vote of no confidence in your continued leadership of the FBI. President-elect Trump has already announced his intention to nominate a candidate to replace you, and the Senate will carefully consider that choice. For my part, I've also seen enough and hope your respective successors will learn from these failures. Chuck Grassley's not happy about him, nor should he be. This is not how the country should work, by the way. Our senators should be able to get an answer from the FBI. There's only 100 of them. How much money does the Senate approve for the FBI in their budgets every year? All of it. So does the House. When they pass the Senate and a budget and it goes to the president, every year, FBI gets what they want. Maybe they shouldn't get what they want. Congress has the power of the purse. Maybe they should use it. And Christopher Wray can sit in traffic like the rest of us. No more private planes for them. So the answer here, I think, is going to come from a new appointment named Kash Patel, who is going to be making his way into the FBI building, and we're looking forward to that. This is an interesting clip that kind of left me irritated and disgusted at the same time. But watch this.
You, Congressman Crow, seem very frustrated based on the report and hearing.
Do I seem frustrated?
That
No,
you-
I know, yeah, very good.
Well, with the fact that you could
You
find
don't.
out more
You don't seem
about the
frustrated.
shooter, both in Butler and the potential shooter
Yeah.
in Mar-a-Lago.
That's actually a really important element to the story, and people have rightful questions about it. I have questions about it, and that is, why did the shooter do this? What drove him to do it? Was he a lone wolf shooter? Did he have associates or affiliates? What was his motivation? How was he radicalized? We endeavored to get
Great questions. Do you have any answers to any of it?
answers to those questions. We submitted numerous requests to the Department of Justice and FBI. Their response is, this is an ongoing criminal investigation, and we can't give that information to Congress.
No, so you don't.
That, in my view, is an unacceptable position, and here's why.
For both Butler and Mar-a-Lago, that was
Correct.
the answer.
That's right. And here's why that's unacceptable. I sit on the Intelligence Committee, I've sat on the Armed Services Committee, and Congress all the time gets access to our nation's most sensitive secrets.
Yep.
Ongoing operations, intelligence operations, military operations. You can't tell me that there isn't a way to put us into a secure facility and get us information about an ongoing criminal
Yeah, there is.
investigation when I regularly am receiving briefs
On
on what
Ukraine.
our spies and our military special operators are doing regularly around the world. So none of this...
Yeah, because they throw you those little stupid briefings. So you're like, wow, we have to give more money to Ukraine or whatever. And they don't actually give them anything meaningful. They're just little pawns being passed around in Congress.
stands to reason, and we have dedicated ourselves to continue to get those answers. And if the FBI and DOJ thinks that they can wait us out and stonewall us, they are wrong.
You think they're intentionally withholding information?
I don't know what their intention is. I'm not a mind reader.
Yeah, you can admit it. They are intentionally holding information. If you can't even come out and admit that,
I've been around Congress long enough to know what
When
people
you get
do when
stonewalled.
you get stonewalled. I mean, listen, this is not uncommon when you're dealing with agencies and departments. It's a pretty regular method, and it's something that, we encounter all the time in our oversight responsibilities.
So we don't know. Or tell me if perhaps you know
We're-
the answers.
we're
Was
in-
there a foreign nexus? Do we know yes or no?
Americans are deluged with misinformation and disinformation that's coming from a variety of sources. And conspiracy theories sometimes take root when there's a lack of information or there's conflicting information. So our job is to try to get information out there, to be transparent, to be accessible,
Give
to
it
tell
to
the
us.
real story. And that's why this is important. This element of that story is important because there's a lot of conspiracies around
Absolutely.
these
Yeah,
shootings,
yeah,
right? And we
right.
take that seriously.
Right,
We want to
yeah.
rebuff those. But, in this case, and I sit on a lot of other committees with access to information, I have seen no evidence that a state actor, an adversary, was responsible for either of these attempted assassination attempts. I have seen no evidence. But, when you're in a position...
have you seen evidence in a category that would allow you to make a determination on that question? I have seen no evidence. Okay, well, have you seen any evidence at all? Because it doesn't sound like you have. I think what he's saying, honestly, is not that I've seen no evidence of foreign interference or foreign state actors. It's that he's seen no evidence at all, more likely. So he couldn't make a determination on that because he hasn't seen anything.
where, the government says, well, it's not this, but we won't tell you what it is, right? And we can't tell you definitively. Well, people respond and have questions about that. And I understand that mentality. So even though we don't have evidence of one thing, people still want to know what else it is. And I still want to know what else it is.
Did he act alone? Do we know that?
We don't know that.
Or Congress doesn't know that?
Yeah, and it's one thing to say, and I'm going to be really clear about
Yes.
this, because this is very sensitive territory, because we want to make sure
Totally.
we're not getting people spun up unnecessarily.
Yeah.
There is no evidence from other sources, internal government sources, from our investigation, that others were involved, that he acted with others, and that a foreign state or adversary was involved in this. But that still raises the question of why did he do this? Was he just a disturbed young man
Just loves
who
Trump,
decided to
that's
take action alone? Probably. I mean, that's probably the answer.
It looks like now. Yeah.
Right? That's what it looks
totally,
like.
yeah.
But we need to know, right? And let's get the information out there that the government has to make sure that we can settle this. That's our obligation.
Okay, so that was a propaganda piece, brought out by both those guys. You guys got to go talk out to the media and just say you have no evidence of anything. It's over. The cover-up is underway.